What's going on, everybody? Scar coming at you with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, we're going to be diving into some historic play. We're going to go over some of the current historic decks that are currently popping off in the meta. These are some decks that I pulled a list from the meta statistics from AetherHub. There's a various ranges of the decks. There's some I also just left off the list just because there's some things happening on Monday. I don't know what things are going to be affected by what is going to be happening on Monday, how that is going to affect certain cards that may either be banned and or restricted or removed from the format as a whole, or even like how possibly campaigns may be adjusted and or reshaped from what they originally do. So these decks pretty much all contain cards that I think will be fine no matter what. I mean, it's possible we may see something removed from these lists, so I do apologize if you look at this video past Monday and things have been either banned or removed from these decks, so I do apologize. But enough of that, let's dive in the video. Let's kind of break down each one of these decks, kind of like we've done in the past videos, kind of go over what each deck does. And I think these decks are actually in a variety of various different budgets, depending on how new or how experienced you are in the meta. Some decks require a lot more rares, and there's some decks that are pretty much mostly commons and uncommons with maybe a couple rares and mythics in it. So there's a wide variety of budgets that these decks do cost to actually put together. So like I said, enough about that. Let's dive in these decks. We'll kind of go in no specific order, just kind of how I have them pulled up. I actually imported them into MTG Arena, so we can go over that. I'm also missing cards because I'm newer to the historic side of the arena, so I don't have all these cards just yet, so some of these decks are incomplete. So let's break them down and talk about them. So the first deck up we have is a mono blue base deck. It's pretty straightforward. It's actually like a mono blue aggressive deck where it's all about kind of being aggressive, like kind of like similar to mono blue decks in the regular standard format, whereas the goal is to kind of pick out your opponent little by little and pretty much just get to the point where you kind of control them enough to that you get enough damage in to kill them. So the deck features a little bit of control and a little bit of early game creatures, and there's some ways to pretty much prevent your opponent from slowing your opponent up from playing certain things, and all the goal is here is to get in and do damage to your opponent's face. So enough of that, let's kind of break down the cards and kind of go over how they affect the deck. So first card up is Curious Obsession. It's just like a card that's currently in standard, but it costs 1 solid blue instead of like the one I think current standard that is, I think, a blue and a white. I just can't think of the card off the top of my head. And whenever this creature deals damage, you may draw a card. And at the beginning of your step, if you didn't attack with that creature, you have to sacrifice it. So the only problem is that if you don't attack with a creature that has this on it, you have to sacrifice this aura on it. So that's the only downfall to this. It only costs 1, which is the benefit of it. You get on one of your early small creatures, it becomes a 2/2, get drawing cards, and it's only uncommon, so it's a pretty effective card for as cheap as it is. So overall, it's a pretty good card for the deck. Next up is Dive Down. Target creature you control gets +3/+0/+3 and gains hexproof until the turn. So it's just in case if one of your opponents might be playing something a little bit burn removal and or spot removal from one of your creatures, you can kind of give your creature +3/+0 and hexproof so they can't target it with anything. Or maybe your opponent goes ahead and blocks with something maybe a little bit bigger that's going to kill it on the receiving end. You can also block it as well. You can also prevent that creature from dying by giving it a little extra toughness. Next up is Mistcloaked Herald. It's definitely a very solid card just because it's a 1-cost 1/1, and the benefit of this card, with it being such a small creature, is that it can't be blocked. So you put some of your certain enchantments on this particular card, like your Curious Obsession, you now pretty much freely get to draw a card every turn, every time your Mistcloaked Herald actually attacks your opponent in the face. And then that becomes 2 unpreventable damage unless your opponent targets this card directly. Next up is Siren Stormtamer, another cheap card, 1-cost 1/1 flyer, but his ability is that you can sacrifice it and then you get counter target spell ability that would target a creature, target you or a creature you control. So your opponent try to do something to your face and or one of your creatures, you can sacrifice him, prevent that from happening, pretty much counter it for 1. Very, very solid card. Overall, definitely cool. The also ability to counter target ability as well as spell for 1 is also very, very effective. Then you got Spell Pierce. This is a pretty solid card just regardless in the very early game, just because it's a 1-cost counter spell that pretty much makes your opponent counter target non-creature spell unless that controller pays 2. So like I said, another way to stop from spot removal from killing one of your creatures or removing your board. And the fact that it costs 1 blue mana gives you a lot of playability that you can also still do something even in slightly later game, maybe when your opponent taps completely out and you're just like, oh, counter for 1, which is definitely a solid choice. Blink of an Eye, it's a 2-cost instant with a kicker of 2. Return target not only permanent to its owner's hand, and if If this spell was kicked, draw a card. So it's a spot bounce effect. You can bounce a card at the end of your opponent's turn, and then if you have extra mana left over, like it's the end of their turn, you can always draw the card to get the little bit of extra card advantage. So extra card advantage is always good. For 2 mana, definitely not a bad card. Next up is Brinework Cutthroat. Just like the standard deck, this is a very solid card for a mono blue deck. Just in the basis has flash. You can play it on your opponent's turn, and then it benefits from you playing stuff on your opponent's turn. Definitely, if your opponent does any way to interact with it, this card can get out of hand, especially if you're playing almost everything consistently on your opponent's turn, as you are kind of sitting there trying to figure out how exactly you want to go and attack your opponent's face. Next up is the Merfolk Trickster. Yet again, another 2-cost 2/2 with flash, and then when it enters the battlefield, you may tap target creature an opponent controls. It loses all abilities until end of turn. Definitely a solid card to play in a mono blue deck for a flash 2/2er combined with Brinework Cutthroat. It's a good way to tap down a creature an opponent controls, and also make it lose its abilities, so maybe they get something at the end of turn. This actually will prevent them from actually having something pop off, which is definitely pretty cool. It doesn't remove counters or anything like that, so just because it loses all abilities doesn't mean it becomes like its base power and toughness. So just FYI, just in case you're trying to maybe play with that. Then you got Brazen Bar, where it's a 3-cost 3/1 flyer with flash. Definitely a card that is in most mono blue decks, or even in decks that splash blue, just because of its first ability with the ability to bounce the target card bounce target not only permanent to an opponent's hand for 2 instant speed, as well as being able to play for the flash 3/1 flyer. And the only problem with it can only block flyers, but it's a good solid 3/1 body that you can definitely fly over the top, especially if your opponent's not playing many creatures and or things that can block things in the air. Then you have to look out Dispersal. It's another counter target spell. This one benefits if you control a pirate. Pretty much it's a 3-cost counter target spell if you don't have a pirate, but it costs 1 less if you control a pirate. There's a few pirates in the deck, so this becomes a 2-cost counter and counters any spell unless your opponent pays 4. Definitely a solid counter to have in a deck that plays a lot of low-cost creatures. We don't play many lands, so to keep our mana pretty efficient for the amount of lands that we may draw in a given game is definitely a good benefit. Sea Dasher Octopus is a new addition from Ikoria. It's definitely a solid card. It's a 3-cost 2/2 with flash, but it has the ability to flash mutate onto a target creature, so that target creature deals combat to a player. You may draw a card, so you put this on maybe one of your Miscloaked Heralds. It then becomes a 2/2. If you had something that had counters, it then becomes this plus whatever counters it currently has on it. So it's definitely cool to give something maybe unblockable the ability to draw a card for 2 mana. Or maybe you just want to play a flash mutate 2/2 or flash octopus for a 2/2 if you just want to get extra body on the board. Then you got Wizard's Retort. It's pretty much a counter target spell unless you control a wizard. It costs 1 less if you control a wizard, and then you counter target spell. Yet again, the deck plays majority pirates and or wizards, so this card's usually going to cost 2. In the weird chance it doesn't, it pretty much costs 3, which is just like most counters in the format, and pretty much counters any target spell. So overall, a good card. And then the deck plays 18 islands and 2 Mystic Sanctuaries. Pretty much the Mystic Sanctuary is good to put things back on the top of your library. Maybe you can draw one of your cards that swing into your opponent and draw a card if they do damage to that opponent. Getting back a counter spell or that particular bounce card. Maybe if your opponent plays something pretty big that you just want to get returned to their hand. Definitely a solid card. The only downfall is if it doesn't it enters tapped unless you control 3 or more other islands. I mean, the deck plays majority islands in 2 of these, so there's a good chance that this is going to play untapped. I mean, I'm hoping you're not playing on turn 1 or turn 2. There won't be anything really in the graveyard to do then to interact with. Plus, it doesn't really gain that ability unless you have 3 or more lands on the battlefield that are islands or came into play untapped. So overall, a good card to get some of these cards back, but this is a very aggressive deck, so the goal here is to kind of get your opponent have the game over by like turn 5 or 6 at the latest, just because the creatures we play aren't the biggest, so getting through for damage really won't be the best. So the next deck up is actually a deck I talked about in standard. There is a standard version that pretty much looks almost exactly the same, but it plays different cards just because of some things aren't available in current standard, but overall it looks pretty familiar to other Gruul decks out there. Also, I do want to throw out there, I know in my budget deck that I did the other day when I posted it, I did make an error and called this a Golgari deck, but this is actually a Gruul aggro deck. This is the historic version that's kind of running around the meta. If you've played any historic, you may have seen this deck already once, but it's pretty much similar to the Gruul deck that is kind of in current standard. It plays Fervent Champion, which is a good solid 1-drop for a 1/1 first strike haster. If there's other knights on the battlefield, it gives that knight Other Knight +1/+0, and then equip abilities cost this 3 less to activate. So if you say get an Embercleave on the battlefield, you can equip it pretty much onto here for free, which is a good solid option. It plays 4 Llanowar Elves for the ramp. For some reason, I don't know why I added the Llanowar Elf from Dominaria. It's possible I don't have a complete set in one of these. I'm also like fairly new to Historic, so I don't have all the cards just yet that are in Historic. So 4 Llanowar Elves for the ramp, and it's also a solid 1/1 attacker in case you decide to go aggressive later in the game. Then you have the Pell Collector, which is also a solid 1-drop, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield or dies, and that creature's power is greater than Pell Collectors, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then he gets trample if you have 3 or more counters on himself. Definitely a solid card that gets out of hand if your opponent can't really deal with it. Burden Tree Emissary for another solid card that actually is really awesome in the fact that it costs 2 mana for a 2/2, and the ability that when you play it, actually adds an additional 2 mana. So you may play Burden Tree Emissary, and then you have on turn 2, and then you have enough mana to then say play one of your other 2 drops or another 2-cost spell, or maybe 1 red and 1 green spell. Like you play this plus a Fervent Champion plus a Llanowar Elf or a Pell Collector. I mean, granted, if you did in that order, I mean your Pell Collector doesn't grow, but pretty much the ability to tap 2 mana to then get 2 mana pretty much back for playing this card is definitely a pretty cool option. Then Dominator's Ambush, because it's just a solid removal card, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature control, and that creature pretty much deals damage to target creature equal to its power. Or Planeswalker, definitely a solid card, gives your creature a +1/+1 counter. A good way for spot removal. It's not like they're fighting, so your creature doesn't receive any damage back. A good just fighting card to get rid of something on the battlefield. Then you got Gallia, which is another solid card for this deck because the deck's very aggressive. The Satyr +1/+1 in haste doesn't really matter because we're not really playing Satyrs to begin with, but whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, you may discard a card at random if you do draw 2 cards. So pretty much if we have a good solid early game, we play like Fervent Champion, maybe a Pell Collector, or we play a Fervent Champion, Burden Tree Emissary into a Gallia on turn 2. Then on turn 3, we swing with those 3 creatures. We're definitely going to draw at least 2 cards and discard a card. Maybe we got just a land card. Yet again, it's a deck that's relatively cheap. A lot of things don't cost over 5 or 4 or 5. The only thing that's expensive is Embercleave, but we're never really paying that at full cost just because we're attacking with a lot of things to do damage to our opponent's face. So overall, just a very solid card in the deck to get the draw effect. I mean, getting card advantage is always a good thing in Magic the Gathering. Then you got the Zertir Goblin, again another 2-drop that is also good and effective with the Burden Tree Emissary, just in the basis that's a 2-cost, 1 red, 1 green, 2/2 with Riot, so you can give it haste after playing Burden Tree Emissary, so it attacks it immediately. So you play this with a Fervent Champion, a Burden Tree Emissary, then turn 3, you drop a Gallia, and then swing with everything. You're going to draw 2 cards. Or, I mean, if your opponent's playing something a little bit more bulky, maybe you actually add a +1/+1 counter, which is always very, very good. Definitely a solid card for an uncommon. Bone Crusher Giant's the next card. He's also a very solid card just on the basis that he has a 2-cost, 2 damage to any target, can't be prevented, and then he has the 3-cost creature that's a 4/3 body, and if your opponent decides to target him with a spell, it deals 2 damage back at the controller. So if they try to burn it or they try to remove it with a direct spell, he's going to deal damage back to their face. Then Yorvil, he's a 1-of just because his mana is a little odd for the deck because it splashes 2 different colors. He has 3 Devotion to green, or 3-cost green, sorry. And then when he enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters, he's a 4/4 for 3. And then whenever another green creature enters the battlefield, then your controller may put a +1/+1 counter on Yorvil. Then if that creature's power and toughness is greater than Yorvil, put another +1/+1 counter. I mean, he's not really, unless we're playing like a Quest and Beast immediately. Actually, Quest and Beast actually isn't that. But if he's really just going to get bigger and bigger because everything in general is, other than Fervent Champion, Bone Crusher Giant, everything actually splashes in some sort of green and its costs. So he'll definitely get bigger, and he's a good card to put an Embercleave on because, I mean, it's a 5/5 Embercleave. It's definitely going to do 5, if not more. So definitely a solid card. It's only a 1-of, just like I said, because the mana is awkward. Then you got Gruel Spellbreaker. He's another solid 3-cost card. His curve is actually very solid, just on the basis that he's a 3-cost, 3/3 with Riot and Trample. And then as long as it's your turn, he has Hexproof. So your opponents can't actually directly deal with him on your turn. They have to figure out a way to deal with him on their turn. The only way they can deal with him on your turn is that they counter him right out of the gates. But he's a strong card for a 3/3 that you can give either +1/+1 and or Hexproof, or not Hexproof, or haste. Another good solid target for Embercleave because your opponents can't interact with the creature before Embercleave goes to equip. So another good solid target there, especially with the more aggressive deck. He's definitely a good solid option. Then we got the one Cloythus, God of Destiny. It's another 3-cost green red enchantment legendary creature. It's indestructible, and then as long as you have devotion for red and green less than 7, it's not a creature. But with the devotion that you can kind of see here in the list, we overall can get to 7 pretty quickly, especially by the time we could possibly like Clothis. At the beginning of our pre-combat main phase, exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a land, we may add red or green. Otherwise, we gain 2 life and deal 2 damage to each opponent. So its second ability is actually pretty solid. Just on the basis of we can remove something that we don't want them to bring back from their graveyard, or just something that we just don't want, and we can make sure we do at least 2 damage to their face, and we gain 2 life. So it's a good way to kind of stabilize in case you're getting a little bit low in mana if you're playing against something else as aggressive. Question B is because he's a solid 4-drop for a 4/4 Vigilance, Death Touch, Haste, so he doesn't tap when he attacks. He can't be chumped by things less than power of 2, and any damage that we dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented, so pretty much it makes all our creatures pretty much unpreventable, so they can't fog and prevent like ours from doing damage to their face. And then whenever he deals damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target planeswalker that player controls. Yet again, a good effective way. You put an Ember Cleave on this, it's definitely going to do 5 damage to the face, then another 5 damage after that. Definitely could eliminate 2 planeswalkers if I'm not mistaken, because it would do damage to that opponent's face twice, dealing 5 damage to each of their planeswalkers if they have multiple planeswalkers. Definitely a solid card. It's a very, very strong card, even in standard. Ember Cleave, like I've been talking about all game, this is what kind of finishes the deck. If you get to like turn 3, turn 4, and you have open mana, have a decent sized board, this could actually finish the game by that time. Ember Cleave is just one of those cards that it's a good finisher, especially in one of these style decks where it's super aggressive, because every time we attack with one of our creatures, this card gets cheaper and cheaper to play. So we attack with 3 creatures, this becomes a 3-cost equip card that we can play at flash speed. It gives our creature +1/+1, and also trample, and also double strike. So it's like the creature goes from maybe like a 3/3 to a 4/4. It's at least, if it's unblocked, it's going to be doing 8 damage, plus whatever else is unblocked will definitely wipe out an opponent's life points in no time. Then, like most other red and green decks, we play a mixture of Castle Empress for that little extra pump if we have nothing else to do with our mana and we just want to get that little bit extra damage in. 4 mountains, 8 forests, 4 stomping grounds, and 4 temples of abandon. We only play 8 forests in the deck because there's some solid 2-cost devotions that we need to make sure we hit. Other than the Ember Cleave, everything else is majority 1 red in their mana cost. Nothing really costs more, so that's why we're playing more forests than we do, or more green sources than we do red sources. But overall, the mana is pretty consistent. I mean, it's not like there's much of a difference. It's a difference of 2. You can always mess around with what you like in this deck. You can always add in maybe like more Yorvos, and you're getting good green mana, so you can add another Yorvo. I personally wouldn't. Maybe you don't want any Yorvos, you want some Questing Beasts. It's another addition that you can kind of swap around. Maybe you don't want as many land or elves and want more Pull Collectors, depending on how aggressive you want to get. But having additional mana is always good, just because you can do things sooner. But definitely a good deck that I don't think will be touched as Monday approaches, so definitely a good deck to maybe get started in Historic Arena, just because it's a lot of cards that you'd already have from standard, and you only have to do minimal investment if you already own some of these cards. Alright, so the next deck up on the list is pretty much Teferi Planeswalker E control deck with a little bit of creature hate. The goal of this deck is to pretty much the goal of this deck is pretty much to control your opponent, get all your planeswalkers out, and get them into like a Teferi lock, and they can't really do anything. Also, we play Sarkhan of the Master List just to kind of give our creatures like the ability to pretty much become creatures, and it's another good solid way to finish off the deck. But kind of let's break down the cards one by one before we jump all the way to the end, before we even get into that whole explanation. So first up is Fate of Wishes, just because it's a solid card. It's a 1/4 flyer. If your opponent's playing something a little more aggressive, it's a good solid blocker that they really can't remove unless they have like a Lava Coil, but majority of the time a Shock or something like that really won't get enough damage through to kill it off if your opponent doesn't play those kind of cards. The main ability though is the ability that we can tap for. We can choose target non-creature card we own from outside of the game and reveal and put it in our hand. So we're going to go over the sideboard after we're all said and done here with some options depending on, based on the deck of what your opponent's playing. We can kind of find the answer to what they're playing to kind of keep the control of the game in our favor. Then we got Search for Azcanta. Just on the basis of the deck, we look at the top card of our library. We may decide to put it in our graveyard. If we have 7 more cards in our graveyard, you may transform it. So the ability here is we can kind of scry the top card of our library and decide to keep it in. We can keep it on top, put it into our hand, or we can throw it in the graveyard and kind of add it up to this ability. So the ability is that it flips. Sorry, I'm going to kind of rotate myself just because I'm a little bit in the way here. The ability here is that Azcanta Sunken Ruin is a source that adds blue mana. as well as we can tap 3, look at top 4 cards of our library. We may reveal a non-creature card, non-land card from among them, put it into our hand, and put the rest on the bottom in our library in any order. We don't really play any creatures in our deck, so for the most part, this card is going to be used to find answers for things that our opponent may be playing to get around. This is kind of like the end goal. It is a legendary land, so we can only have one of these out. But at the same time, too, we may also, like if we get Azcanta Sunken Ruin, we can also then replay another Search for Azcanta, so we kind of do like the same thing as the one ability, because it's a May ability to flip it over, so we don't actually ever have to get 2 of these lands. Or if we have one of these out and 1 land and our land's tap, we want to get this ability again, we can always main, untap, and sacrifice one of our legendary permanents. But like I said, one of them is good enough just because it's a good scry ability pretty much in finding the answer that we need. Next up is Narset, because most blue decks that have blue and play Narset just for the ability it slows your opponent down from drawing cards, just on the basis that it can't pretty much draw more than 1. As well as we can -2 when we look at the top 4 cards of our library, we choose a non-creature, non-land card from among them, put it into our hand, and the rest in the bottom in any order. Yet again, another card to find the answer that our opponent's playing. You gotta get the hint here. A lot of things that we're going to be playing are kind of either slowing our opponent down from playing the things they want to play, or we kind of look for the answers to kind of combat the things they are playing and get it on the board. Next up is Teferi Time Rattler, yet again another card. Pretty much slows down the game of Magic so that we play cards there in our turn, we can play cards there in their turn, but our opponent can only play cards there in their turn. And unfortunately, it kind of makes their cards go a little bit slower. Definitely solid card because it gives us the ability to make any of our sorcery spells have flash, as well as we can tap -3. We can turn target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand and draw a card. So if we have something, we don't want something that our opponent's playing, we can bounce it back to their hand. If we have something that we want to replay, maybe get the effect the second time, we can also -3 and bounce something back that we don't want on the battlefield back to our hand. And if we want and don't have anything we want to target, we can just -3 and we can as well just draw a card for the effect even if we don't return anything. Deafening Clarion, it's good against all the smaller aggro-y decks, like, you know, like a mono white life gain deck. Pretty much what it does a 3 damage across the board to each creature, including our creatures, as well as we can give our creatures lifelink until end of turn. More majority of the time, if we're playing against a more aggressive deck, we're just going to -3 across the board. And if we have any bigger creatures that are on the battlefield, we can always give our creatures lifelink until end of turn, so definitely a good way to get some life back, especially if we're getting low. Shatter the Sky, just a complete board wipe. Each player who controls a creature with 4 power or greater draws a card, then destroy all creatures. So if our opponents have anything that's bigger than 4, they're more than likely going to draw out only a card, so it's not the worst thing if they control a creature that's greater than 4. But it pretty much wipes the board, pretty much resets everything, so we can kind of, you know, restabilize the board, get it back in our favor. Reconnaissance Mission is a 1-of in this deck. Pretty much, you'll see once we get kind of down to our planeswalkers, whenever a creature we control deals damage to combat damage to a player, you may draw a card, and we can also cycle it for 2. But it's a pretty interesting card. I mean, I think it's better in a more aggressive, like, aerial form, just on the basis that we'll draw cards whenever those creatures do combat damage. But we can also cycle it for 2 if we just need a card to draw a card for 2. Cycle in can be played at any time. It can't be countered, so it's a good way to get pretty much a free card draw for 2 mana. Partisan Invention, because why not just make our things cost cheap? This could be a card that gets affected on Monday, so I do apologize if this card gets removed from this format or in any sort of way, but I don't really have that feeling that it will, just because I think it's a good card, but I don't think it really breaks anything. Also, I don't really think it breaks anything that's currently going on in Historic, just because there's a lot of decks out there that are a little bit more aggressive in what cards they play and the things they get for the advantage of playing other cards. But this card here, pretty much it gives the ability to cast only spells during our turn. We can cast more than 2 spells in each of our turns, and they may cast spells with a convert mana cost less than equal number of lands we control while paying their mana costs. So pretty much in a way, we can pretty much play any of our cards in our hand if they cost X 4 or less, more than likely, because we don't play any ramps. So this is going to we're gonna at least play something for 4 or less, and we play them for free for the most part. So we don't have to tap our mana. We can leave our mana open and tap for other things, like, you know, for our Search for Azcanta land, maybe Castle Vantis, Castle Ardenvale. We have things to kind of tap our mana for, and then we can pretty much focus on this ability to play our Planeswalkers and our other spells to deal with the things that our opponents are playing out on the battlefield. Definitely a solid card. Definitely gets you the ability to play multiple powerful things. We also play a lot of lands, so it's not going to be an issue of not being able to play things from our hand, although sometimes the shuffler gets messed up, and even if we play a lot of lands, there's not always a good chance that you're going to be able to actually play all the things in your hand. Next up, we've got the Narset of the Ancient Way. It's definitely a very solid planeswalker for the ability that we can +1 gain 2 life, and we can actually add a red, blue, or white mana to play a non-creature spell. We can also -2 to draw a card and discard a card, and when we discard a card this way, Narset deals damage equal to that card's converted mana cost to target creature and or planeswalker, so it's a good removal card. A lot of the cards in our deck are really, really big, so there's a good way for us to definitely spot removal something, just because everything in our deck is, for the most part, very expensive. And then we can also -6, and whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we are pretty much given the ability to do 2 damage to any target. Definitely a good effect. Like I said, majority of our deck is non-creature spells. I don't think we play a single creature other than Fey Wishes, but yet again, we're playing it for majority of the time it's sorcery cost. We're not playing it for its actual creature cost, but it's just an additional benefit to kind of get us to the game where we kind of start taking over getting us to that mid game where we start taking over, in case we're playing against something a little bit more aggressive. But majority of the time we're looking in our sideboard for an answer for the later game. And we got to roll in a thought, because why not? Just a one of. Whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we draw a card. There's, like I said, a majority of the deck is non-creature spells. Definitely a good card to get card advantage for additional ability of being able to get it every time we play a non-creature spell. Elspeth's Conqueror's Death, because it's one of the best big thing spot removals, as well. It has 3 stages to it, and the ability to spot removal something that's cost 3 or greater, the ability to make our opponent's stuff that's non-creature spells cost 2 more until the end of my next turn or your next turn, and then be able to return a planeswalker and or a creature from our graveyard with a +1/+1 counter or a loyalty counter is also a great benefit, because our deck's a lot of planeswalkers. It's a good way to get back a planeswalker from our graveyard to then replay it and give it additional loyalty counter. Then you got Sarkin the Masterless. Yet again, it's a 5-cost planeswalker. Whenever a creature attacks you or planeswalker control, each dragon we deals 1 damage to that creature. We're not really playing it for the dragon ability, but the dragon could come in handy in case you just need a blocker. But we can +1 each planeswalker we control gains becomes a 4/4 red dragon creature and gains flying. So pretty much all our planeswalkers that would be on the battlefield when we play this ability are now all being able to attack, kind of like a Gideon, but pretty much he gives all our creatures that ability, and we can swing in to pretty much finalize the game. If we have 3-4 planeswalkers, that's 12 damage in the air that maybe our opponent can't block. Definitely solid card to kind of end out a game. Then you got the Oath of Teferi. It's yet again another Teferi card that when it enters the battlefield, exile another the target permanent you control, return to the battlefield under its control in the beginning of your next end step. And you may activate the loyalty abilities of planeswalkers you control twice each turn rather than only once. So you may be able to get double benefits, whether you play double Nar sets, double both Narth sets, Teferi twice, like you can +1 and also -3. There's also the other Teferi that we can also plus and minus and do things. So giving the ability to give our planeswalkers that additional ability is actually pretty interesting, especially if we're getting close to a Nar set emblem. Maybe we get to the ability to get 1 over, and then we minus it and then get the emblem is definitely a cool idea. Just it's a one of, just it's like a glory thing. We don't really need it to win, but it's cool to have just in case. Then you get the Fairy Hero Dominaria, getting another 5-cost planeswalker. Draw a card at the beginning of our end step. We could untap 2 lands, so we can play things during our turn, untap lands, and kind of have now untapped mana to now play more things. And then we can -3 put target online permanent on top of its owner's library, 3rd from the top, and then we can -8 and get an emblem whenever you draw a card, exile top permanent controls. If we're controlling and our opponent hasn't given up by this point, we can definitely make them put things on top, pretty much exile things that our opponent controls, and they really can't do anything about it. But I think at the point you play an emblem, depending on what the emblem is, there's a good chance that your opponent's just going to give up and concede. Now, as for lands, the lands are pretty all over the place. We got some Castle Ardenvale, some Castle Vantis, both for their abilities to create the 1/1 human tokens, to be able the ability to scry, Glacial Fortresses, just because it's a great land because it interacts with planes, and also shock lands. It comes into play untapped unless we control plains or an island, or it comes untapped if we control plains or island. Hollow Fountains, Steam Vents, Temples, Clifftop Retreats, same thing as the Glacial Fortress, Sacred Foundries, Temple of Triumphs for the Scry, Triomes because we're playing Jeskai mana, and Interplanar Beacon just because every time we play a Planeswalker spell we gain a life, so good life gain. We play a lot of Planeswalkers, so we're definitely going to gain some life, and the ability to filter our mana to get the colors we need in order to play Planeswalker spells is also very, very good. Now onto the sideboard. It's pretty much a little all over the place just because, yet again, it's answers to things our opponents will be playing in the historic format. So if, like I said, if any of this is a little weird, it's just because we're looking for the answer to maybe do something to our opponent that is going to answer something. So we got Grafdigger's Cage to prevent our opponents from coming from graveyards and libraries. Players can't cast spells from the graveyards and or libraries, so they can't escape anything, and they can't pretty much search for anything from their graveyards and or libraries and put it back on the battlefield. So pretty much gets rid of those mechanics. Elder Spell, destroy any number of target planeswalkers. Choose a planeswalker you control. Put 2 loyalty counters on each planeswalker control. So we're playing against another copy planeswalker deck. We can grab one of these, kill some of their planeswalkers, get loyalty counters on a particular planeswalker we maybe want to get the emblem for, or just need more loyalty on it. Definitely a cool spell. Actually, Extreme Render. Maybe their opponent's playing a lot of stuff from their graveyards. This is just another way to pretty much get rid of their graveyard, also mill them a little bit at the same time. And the fact that they can't use abilities to get things from their library or search for things from their library is definitely also a cool thing. Then you got Unmore Ego, yet again another 3-cost sorcery. Choose a card name, search target player's graveyard, hand, library for up to 4 cards with that name, exile them. That player shuffles their library, draws a card for each card exiled this way. So I mean, as much as we may remove stuff from their library and hand and stuff, I mean, they do get the benefit of drawing some cards, but the idea is we can get rid of that. Maybe their win con, or at this moment there's Agent of Treachery. I mean, we don't really know what's going to happen on Monday, but you can always get rid of an Agent of Treachery, a Winota, particular planeswalker like a Luca or something. I don't really know if those cards that are in the historic meta. I haven't really played, but those are things that this card could target. Exilians Bind In, enters battlefield, exile target now land. Permanent controllers until Exilians leave the battlefield. Your opponents can't cast spells with the same name, so if you know if the deck running multiple copies of the same card, we can exile a particular card and prevent them from playing any more copies of that card at any time. Time wipe, because why not? Just an additional way to wipe the board, also giving us the ability to bounce one of our creatures back to our library. Unfortunately, we don't really play any creatures, so we don't really bounce anything back, but just another solid way to wipe the board is definitely good. Ender the God Eternal, it deals 4 damage to target creature, and you gain life equal this way. And then we get to put the top 4 cards of their library into the graveyard, and then we get to amass 4, so we get a 4/4 out of this. Just another solid way to maybe deal with something or spot removal on a particular card. Decent thing to search for, get an ability to get a 4/4 creature, so good way to kind of target something we want to get rid of. Nicol Bolas, we're only going to really pull him because we don't really play the black mana. If we have Fires Out, it's a good card because he copies pretty much the abilities of all other planeswalkers on the battlefield. We can +1, we can draw a card. Each opponent exiles a card from their hand or permanent they control. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Each opponent who doesn't control a legendary creature or planeswalker loses the game. Majority of the time, he's great for just getting additional Teferi effects, additional Narset effects, so definitely a good card. And the ability that he can pretty much destroy a creature and or planeswalker is also very, very solid. Command the Dreadhorde, because we get to choose any number of creature and or planeswalker cards from the graveyard. It deals damage equal to the converted mana cost of those cards, and we get to put them on the battlefield under our control. So just in case if any of our things get removed and we just want to do one fell swoop and get everything right back, Command the Dreadhorde's that card. Liliana, because why not? Whenever a creature we control dies, we draw a card. We can create 2/2 zombie token creatures. We can make our opponent sacrifice 2 creatures, or each player sacrifice 2 creatures, and we can -9 each opponent. Each opponent chooses a permanent they control of each type, and pretty much sacrifice the rest. So if we want, we can possibly get her to -9 and pretty much make our opponent reset back down to 1 of everything that they may own for each type. Thought Distortion, it can't be countered. Target opponent reveals their hand, exile all non-creature, non-land cards from that player's hand and graveyard. So it's a good way to just kind of wipe their hand of anything but a land and creatures. So definitely a cool card. It's very, if we're playing a deck that we know is very spell heavy, this is a good card to pretty much stop them from having all the spells in their hand and or the library. Casualties of War, just because yet again with fires we can destroy a target artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. Good for spot removal, like if we play any decks that play the land that pretty much produces zombies every time we put a land, so good card there. Good to just get multiple effects if they're playing a little bit of everything. Definitely a good card, especially when it works with fires. Star of Extinction, 7-cost card, destroy target land. It deals 20 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. Yet again, if they play the land that creates zombies, we can destroy that target land and deal 20 damage across the board and just wipe out everything. Good card. Like I said, that card's kind of late game card, so if you get this out on them, they pretty much, unless they have multiple copies, they're not at least having zombies on the battlefield. Plane-wide Celebration, 7 costs. Choose 4. You may choose the same mode more than once. We can create 2/2 citizen tokens of all colors, return target permanent card from our graveyard to our hand, proliferate and or gain 4 life. The proliferate is very, very good just for the basis of we can proliferate our planeswalkers and then pretty much maybe get them to the point where we can cast their emblems, which is definitely a very solid ability. And then Inspired Ultimatum for the giggles in a way. But we played Jeskai mana, so we can play this actually with the mana in our actual deck. But pretty much it gives us 5 life, deals 5 damage to any target, and we draw 5 cards. This is a good way to maybe reset our hand, maybe decent spot removal, or deal 5 damage to our opponent's face, and we gain some life. But a lot of the other cards in our deck, unless our opponent's really playing something that we don't really have, these cards don't have any effect, this card's actually a good thing to bring into your hand to maybe deal with just some extra damage to your opponent's creature and or face. Next deck up is we have a mono white heals is like what I like to call it. There's a lot of life gain to the deck. The deck focuses around gaining a whole bunch of life on the basis of everything triggers things that gain life. It's pretty straightforward. It's kind of comparable to the mono white decks that you may see in standard that have just things that make you heal up cards, but this one has a little bit more because there's certain cards in the deck that are legal and historic that kind of make you gain life even when your opponent plays things. So it's definitely an interesting deck. It's very good and new player friendly, especially in a newer format if you haven't played a lot of historic, just because the goal of the deck is to gain a bunch of life and just hopefully get a lot of damage in by making your Johnny's Pride Mate and or anything else that gains life, or using Heliod to give things +1/+1 counters. Actually, the surprising thing is, until I kind of imported this list that I found online, I did not know I did not own a full set of Heliod, so I only own one, which is very surprising, just because I know when I buy usually that set, I usually get gems out of it, so it's kind of curious as to why I don't own a full set of Heliods at this time. But to start it off, we have Alsage just because it's a very solid protection card. It's a 1/1 for 1 with lifelink, and we can sacrifice it, and we can give target creature or enchantment we control protection from a color of our choice until end of turn. So it's definitely good to protect something we definitely don't want to get removed from the battlefield or targeted by one of our opponent's spells. Giant Killer is definitely a good card because it's we can use it to destroy target creature with power 4 or greater, or we can bring it on the battlefield to kind of slow our opponent's maybe aggressive deck down because it's a 1/2 body for 1. We tap 2 and tap target creature, so definitely tapping something now that maybe we don't want it swinging in or getting some sort of effect with it is definitely very, very solid. But overall, it's a pretty good card. Then Healer's Hawks because it's 4 cost 1/1 flyer with lifelink. Definitely a good way to get damage in, especially if your opponent doesn't play a lot of flyers. Legion's Landing is another solid white card. It enters battlefield. We create a 1/1 vampire token with lifelink. When we attack with 3 or more creatures, we get to transform it, which we then get a white mana land called. We get a white mana land called Adantos. Adantos the first 4. It creates white mana, and then we tap 3 and pretty much create 1/1 white vampire tokens with lifelink. So definitely a good way to get tokens on the battlefield if we want more creatures and gain more life. Sarah's Ascendant. This card benefits from if we have 30 or more life. It gets +1/+5 and has fly-in, as well as it's a 1/1 for 1 with lifelink. So just a good way to gain some additional life. By itself for 1 cost, it's not maybe the best, but it's good when we get to 30 more life, and there's a lot of ways for us to get up that quickly or get up that high very quickly. Then you got the Soul Warden, which is one of the cards that helps us get there. So it's a 1 cost 1/1, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield, we may gain life. And it says another creature, so it doesn't actually specify whether our opponent plays any. If our opponent's creatures are our creatures, so we gain 1 life regardless of what comes onto the battlefield creature-wise. Combine that with tokens, we gain life. We combine that, our opponent playing stuff, we gain life, and maybe put multiples of these out, we gain even more life. As Johnny's Pride Mate, it's like the stapled card to play when you play in life gain, just because it gets stronger the more life we gain. Combine that with like a Heliod or a Linden. This thing can definitely get pretty big and pretty aggressive pretty quickly, just because every time we gain a life, we get a +1/+1 counter. So when like a Soul Warden procs or a Linden procs, just on the basis of that 1 point of damage we gain for each trigger of that ability, we're going to gain that many +1/+1 counters. So Primates definitely can get out of hand pretty quickly. Our opponent can't deal with them. Daxos is another one of those cards that helps us gain more life. Whenever another creature we control enters the battlefield or dies, we gain 1 life, and his toughness is equal to our devotion to white. We play majority white, so his devotion will get up there pretty quickly. So he's a good chumper in case our opponent's trying to attack in, maybe with something a little bit more aggressive or bigger. But definitely another way to gain even more life. Then you got Heliod. As long as our devotion to white is less than 5, Heliod is in creature. But whenever we gain life, we may put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or enchantment we control. And his second ability is that if we have any opal mana, we can tap 2 mana and we give target creature lifelink at the end of turn. So if we don't have anything that really gains us life, we can give something lifelink, give our Ajani's Pridemate lifelink, and we can give ourselves more ways to get more counters. Then we got the Linden for the 3 cost, 3/3 vigilance, and whenever a white creature control attacks, we gain 1 life. So combine that, like I said before, with the Pridemate, we're just going to get a whole bunch of life gain and then pretty much make our Pridemate bigger even before it deals damage. So we swing in this procs, we get all those procs and triggers. If we have more than 1 Pridemate out, they get very big pretty quickly depending on how many things swing in. Definitely can get out of hand. Also has vigilance, is pretty solid, so we don't actually have to tap it to attack. Just another way to gain even more life. Then you got a Johnny, Strength of the Pride. It's another way to play a cat token that gains life or gains tokens every time we gain life. We also can +1 and we can gain life equal to the number of creatures we control, equal to the number of creatures or planeswalkers control. The deck is very small, so there's a good possibility by the time this comes out we have either 3 or 4 creatures. If we're playing against something maybe a little bit more aggressive, or we've done something to somehow take damage, definitely a good way to heal. And then if we have 15 or more life, then our starting life total, he can he pretty much makes our opponent exile each artifact and creature they control. So it's a good way to do a board removal that only affects our opponent than ourselves. So it's a good board wipe in case our opponents are playing a bunch of enchantments and or a bunch of artifacts or creatures. Or artifacts and creatures, sorry, not enchantments. I do apologize. Then you got Conclave Tribunal. Yet again, it's another solid pretty much move something from the game, move something from the battlefield. Non-land, of course, and we can convoke, which makes us be able to tap our own creatures in order to play its convoke cost. Pretty much just also remove something from the battlefield until this leaves the battlefield. It's definitely a good card for the amount of creatures we do play. We play tokens as well, so we can always tap them down to play this ability. Definitely a solid card. Then we play the Ranger VS, which is another solid card just for its value that you're getting for the 4 costs. So pretty much what it does, it's a 4 cost 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, we may search our library for up to 2 creature cards and look at mana costs 1 or less and reveal them and put them in our hand and shuffle our library. Very good if our opponents play some sort of board removal, just because Ranger VS will pretty much reset all of that, so we get more things back onto the battlefield to gain either more life and or do more damage to our opponent's face. So definitely a good value card for the cost that it does. Then we round it out with 2 Castle, Arden Vales, and 20 Plains, just because, like I said, the most expensive thing in this deck is only 4 costs, so lands shouldn't be any issue. Castle Arden Vale is there to maybe do something with our excess mana, as well as, you know, we can get tokens or creatures on the battlefield, just get more damage in our opponent's face. The deck curves out at 2.2, which is not very expensive, like I said, that's why it doesn't need many lands. Definitely new player friendly. Just on the basis that it's mostly creature deck, very few enchantments, majority of them are creatures anyway, and just plays the planeswalkers. These are cards that you may already have. You just may have to get the Ranger of Eoses and also the Legion's Land-ins. But other than that, majority of these cards are cards that you do get from playing just normal standard. So you may already even have these if you do play a mono weight version of this deck in standard. So this last deck up is kind of like a deck that I've been mulling over about playing. The only thing is I just don't have any rare wild cards to play, but this is pretty much a Tempered Steel deck. There's a couple different versions of it. This is my own version of it. I mean, it's probably similar to someone else's version, but it's pretty much just a Tempered Steel deck where the goal is to play cheap artifacts, play things like All That Glitters, Steel Overseer to pump our creatures. The whole goal of the deck is just to play a bunch of artifacts that are just going to get stronger, and if our opponent doesn't deal with them, they're just going to overpower our opponent. So to start off, we got the 0-2 Flyer Ornithopter, definitely solid in any historic artifact deck just because it costs you 0, so it just comes onto the battlefield as a creature for free, and it gives you things to do with your mana. Gingerbrute, it's another card that you may have seen in that Baubles white deck that's been going around, just on the basis of it's 1-cost 1/1 with haste, and you can actually tap 1 and make it unblockable except with creatures by haste. So if our opponent's playing something slower where things don't have haste, this Gingerbrute will definitely become a problem or a nuisance. Then you got Locthwain Gargoyle. It's another solid artifact card for the basis of that it's a 0/3 body, and then on top of it you can tap 4, give a +2/+0 and gain fly until end turn, but the fact that it's a 0/3 body is going to prevent our opponent from really directly doing damage to it. And then at the beginning too, when it's a 0/3, they're not really going to do anything about it because it's like it's not going to do any damage, so it's not bothering me now. Then you got Spire and Construct. It's just another good solid artifact creature that costs 1 with the ability that when it dies we get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature control. We're playing all artifacts, so we could put something like on a Locthwain Gargoyle, Gingerbrute, Ornithopter, Steel Overseer, Stonecoil Serpent, Crystalline Giant, all the creatures that we do play. All that glitters pretty much bumps all our artifacts, or all the creature this targets by +1/+1 for each artifact or enchantment we control. Like I said, everything we control is an artifact other than our lands, so this definitely is going to get very big very quickly, so it's going to benefit from itself and all the artifacts we do play. Glass Casket is actually an artifact that costs white mana, so it's not a white cost enchantment. It's actually just an artifact card that you need white mana for. Pretty much it gets to exile target creature opponent controls with green mana cost 3 or less until it leaves the battlefield. I mean, if you don't have any of these, you can always play other spot removal, but the fact that it costs cheap in the artifact deck that we're not playing a lot of lands is actually one of the reasons why we're actually playing it in our deck. Steel Overseer, this is kind of like the commander of the deck. You get one of these out and our opponent doesn't have any way to do it. It makes all our artifacts stronger, just because all you have to do is tap it, put a +1/+1 counter on each artifact. It's not just one artifact, it's the whole board. So it makes our artifacts just that much bigger. Definitely a solid card. It's like a must need for this deck to really make it work and be effective. Tempered Steel, it's another solid card that just came out with the new Anthology 3. I just haven't bought in the pack, so I don't have all the Anthology 3 cards. I'm on the fence if I want to buy the pack or if I just want to craft certain cards that I want from the pack, so I haven't really committed just yet. But pretty much it's another card, just maybe buffs all our artifact creatures, gives them +2/+2 for 3, which is definitely very solid. We play a whole bunch of artifacts that are very cheap, so giving them +2/+2 just make them that much more of a pain and a nuisance for our opponent. Then next card up is another card that I personally like. I think it's the one card I may play something a little differently. It may be a little problem just because we don't play many lands, so I play Crystalline Giant just on the basis of we get to choose it gets a counter, any counter at random that it doesn't have from them. So from flying, first strike, that touch, hexproof, lifelink, menace, reach, trample, vigilance, and a +1/+1 counter. So pretty much this thing can get ridiculous and have a whole bunch of random things on it very quickly. So definitely a cool card. I kind of wanted to mess around with it in this deck just on the basis I wanted to see how it really plays out. I'm sure there's other things I could add in the deck that could be more effective for the mana that we have, but this is something I want to mess around with and kind of see. Then you got the Stonecoil Serpent, just because it's a solid card. It's an X cost artifact card. Has reach, trample, and protection for multicolor, so they can't target with multicolored spells like a lot of planeswalkers for the most part that people do play. The popular ones usually are multicolored, so they can't target it with any of those planeswalkers. And the ability that you can tap X, so you can pretty much play it at any turn that you feel like you need something to play, and this just fills that need. And it comes into the battlefield with +1/+1 counters on it. Another thing I wanted to try is there's that the Ozolov, that artifact. I kind of want to maybe splice in maybe 1 or 2 of those into this deck just because we're putting counters on things. It'd be kind of cool idea to mess around with putting those. If any of our artifacts die that have counters on them, it'd be kind of cool for those counters to go on that thing, and then we get to put them on a new artifact that may come in the battlefield later. It's one of those things I want to mess around with. I just haven't played yet, so I haven't really wanted to tinker the deck too much. This is just pretty much a base list that I've seen going around, but I just kind of add in the Crystalline Giant because I think it's a cool card to mess around with maybe in this format. Then you got 10 plains, 3 islands, 4 glacial fortresses, and 4 hollow fountains. Like I said, we don't play many lands. It's only a 21 land deck, but on the basis of that, it's kind of like cool. Like it's like a cheap artifact deck that literally doesn't cost too much investment. I think the only thing added here that really costs investment is probably the 16 rares, but I feel like there's other things you can play instead. I think the card that maybe I saw on a list was actually much cheaper, but I thought this was just a little bit cooler of a play. So overall, this is a pretty solid deck. I don't know if it has a side. It does have a sideboard. I was like, some of these decks I don't build sideboards, but you know, Soul Lanterns for artifact removal, graveyard removal, give something, protection for black and more graveyard removal. Things that we pretty much make our opponents not cast anything from anywhere other than their hands, so pretty much prevent them from bringing anything back from the graveyard. Thalia, because we want to slow up our non-creature spells our opponents play if they're playing more control. Definitely get out of hand, especially if our opponent's playing counters, then they can only play like 1 counter or 1 like spell at a turn. Spyglass, just because, you know, it's good. And then Mystic Forge, because it gives us the ability to cast artifacts and color spells from the top of our library, and we pay 1 life and we exile the top card of our library. But it's just there really so we can just get additional ways to play more cards. Like I said, overall this deck is kind of like a work in progress. This is also kind of like a bonus video. I meant to only do 5, but I added this one as well. So I just kind of threw this in here at the end. So in closing, I kind of wanted to bring some light onto maybe some meta decks that are currently in the format. I kind of want to go over a basis of this. I haven't really messed around with Historic in a way recently. I kind of messed around with it before Ikoria came out, but I haven't really revisited since. The way the meta is currently. It's kind of gotten kind of stale depending on how Monday goes and what gets removed. I may actually start turning in, building some historic decks and doing videos of those. So let me know what you guys think of historic down in the comments below, whether you like it or not. Have you guys been messing around with it at all? Because like I said, the meta in standard's kind of stale, so it's definitely kind of interesting to hop into historic and kind of see what's going on there. If you guys like this video, hit that like button. It definitely helps the channel out a lot. If you guys want to see when I post more videos, hit that subscribe button. I'll catch you in the next video.